Great, thanks. Yeah, I'm very happy to kick off the afternoon session. And first, I want to thank the organizers for including this paper in the program, and thanks for putting together amazing set of papers. So my name is Chuan. So today I'm going to present my paper on the welfare effects of sponsored product advertising. So to start, let me first show you some search results that you can get. Sorry, that's great. So to start, let me first show you some search results that I got when I look for something on Amazon, Walmart, Instacart, and Uber Eats. On all these pages, everything circling red is a sponsored product. To be placed in these positions, a seller needs to submit a bid in real time at auction, and then they will be ranked in these auctions and pay the platforms for each click on the sponsor list. Below these sponsored products are organic results, and they're determined by the platform's ranking algorithm.
At least some of us showed up on time, Ken.
And for both types of products, when the consumer makes a purchase, the seller will need to pay the platform a commission fee, usually a percentage of the price. In recent years, we have seen a huge expansion in this market. So this table shows the ad revenues for those platforms I just showed you, along with their growth rates in 2024. So remarkably, Amazon's ad revenues surged from $2 billion in 2016 to over $50 billion last year. For Instacart, although it is well known as a grocery delivery platform, nearly 30% of its revenues came from selling ads. So more and more platforms are increasingly relying on this type of advertising as an important source of their profits. And this trend has been widely recognized in the industry. For example, a leading consulting firm calls it retail media revolution that everyone should get ready for. However, despite its increasing prevalence, there's been some mixed reaction. On one hand, as you can see from these headlines, some consumers are frustrated about the search results getting worse, and sellers on these platforms complain about higher selling costs. On the other hand, proponents argue that advertising can help sellers reach new consumers and increase the visibility for less established products. And this trend also represents a substantial change in many platforms' monetization strategies, which used to be primarily commissions. The discussion is highly policy relevant. In 2023, the FTC launched a lawsuit against Amazon, citing its expanding advertising business as evidence for market power and call for regulation. In this paper, I'm going to develop a framework to analyze the welfare effects of sponsored product advertising, focusing empirically on Amazon. Compared to a scenario with only organic search results, introducing advertising on these platforms may affect welfare through different channels. First, these organic rankings on these platforms may not always reflect consumer preferences, especially for some newer products. So advertising could allow some high quality or low cost products to reach more consumers and enhance efficiency. However, if organic rankings are pretty accurate, it could be the case that some low quality sponsor results would displace high quality alternatives in the presence of search frictions. And meanwhile, sellers may pass on their advertising expenses to consumers in the form of higher prices. And last, as I alluded before, the platform usually has access to multiple revenue streams. If advertising became unavailable, the platform may try to rely more on other instruments to raise more revenues, creating other types of distortion. To empirically quantify these different factors, I have collected sponsored and organic results from over 1 million searches on Amazon. I also obtained information for all these products and some ad options. I then use this data to estimate a model of consumers, sellers, and the platform. In this model, consumers purchase products and their search frictions. Sellers compete in prices and bids to maximize their expected profit. And the platform selects a commission rate. Using model estimates, I can simulate counterfactual scenarios with different sponsor positions in search results, which allow me to quantify the welfare implications. As a preview of my findings, my paper finds that removing advertising on Amazon could harm consumers and sellers. And an important mechanism is that the removal of advertising could incentivize the platform to raise its commission fee, which can lead to a large distortion that outweighs other benefits of removing advertising. If instead I assume a fixed commission rate, then removing advertising could benefit consumers and sellers. This reversal in the welfare comparison highlights the importance to account for the platform's response in the analysis. A limit on total sponsor positions could be a better policy target than either a status quo or a complete ban on advertising. I also found that the welfare effects of advertising have substantial variation across different markets, depending on the exact market conditions. My favorite, yes.
As far as I know, Amazon hasn't changed the commission rate in like 18 years.
Yeah.
So this is a counterfactual increase in commission rate in the absence of advertising.
Yeah, I think there are two parts of that observation. First, I think from a platform perspective, as I'm going to show in my model, the platform not only cares about its own profits, but also the welfare of other market participants, just to maximize some long-term adoption or long-term profits. So I'm going to assume that the platforms will place a weight on the welfare of other consumers. And it could be the case that at the beginning of the platform or in the early stage, they place a higher weight, but then as they become more dominant, they're starting to place this lower and lower weight on welfare of other participants. This could be consistent with a flat commission fee, but increasing advertising. Or another interpretation that I'm going to emphasize later, this commission fee is more like a representation of a broader set of monetization instruments that Amazon can use, like these fulfillment fees for third-party sellers. And these fees are indeed changed or dynamically, or at least each year, which could incorporate this substitution across different instruments. So my paper is built on a very long literature on search advertising and position auction. Most of the empirical work focused on search engines. There's some recent theoretical work looking at advertising on retail platforms. So I applied these models to the empirical setting of a large retail platform and allow for the platform's response. And my paper is also closely related to a growing literature on these platform designs and the welfare effects of regulating different platforms. So I focused on one fast-growing area that is highly relevant on many of these platforms. And more broadly, you can think of advertising as this e-commerce analog to these slotting fees in the physical retail industry, where the manufacturers can pay the retailers for better places on their shelves. So it can observe pretty detailed data on product placement and payment and provide some new evidence to its classical debate.
So I'm curious, in your model, do you allow endogenous entry and exit of the platform? And second, endogenous choices on product design for quality and vertical?
So in this paper, as I will show you later, my data covers a 2-month period. So I do not directly model this margin on the entry and exit. I do hope to work on follow-up paper that tries to look at this longer-term effects using a longer panel, like 1 year or 2 years of data. I think this advertising in principle has the benefit of solving this co-start problem, which could encourage more enter in this market. It could also reduce sellers' profitability, causing more exits of some previously high-selling products. So I think these type of long-term effects is pretty interesting, but this is not currently within the scope of this paper, and also do not allow for changes in product design or other aspects. More like a short-term effect. Great. Now let me discuss the data I use for this paper. So my main data set includes a large set of scraped search results from Amazon. So I first identify several thousand keywords with the high search volumes on Amazon. So here are some examples of some keywords in my sample. For each of these keywords, I scrape its search results 6 times a day over a 2-month period in 2022, which gives me over 1 million searches in total. For each search, I can observe sponsored and organic result on the first page. So there are 2 types of products, search results, and those search results in my sample contains 60 products, while 12 of them are sponsored ones. And this panel is a visual illustration of the search results, where each block corresponds to a single product. There are usually 4 sponsored results at the top of the search result, and the remaining ones are mixed into the search results. For all these products, I obtain their daily prices, sales quantities, listed time, and consumer reviews. So I can compare these sponsored and organic results located in similar positions along different dimensions or on these observed characteristics. So I find that compared to top organic results in the same search, these top sponsored results have a shorter listen time on Amazon by about 1 year and substantially fewer reviews.
When listing time, you mean how long they've been listed?
Yeah, I can observe when the product was first listed on Amazon. So it's like entering the platform.
Saying is they were listed more for a shorter time compared to.
Yeah, so it means that they are
Organic.
relatively more newer products or products of younger platform. So this comparison suggests that advertising could increase the visibility for some less established products. And for prices, I find that these top sponsor results have 16% higher prices compared to their organic counterparts. And advertising payment could be a contributing factor to this high price. I also obtained the commission rate set by Amazon. This rate is the same for third-party sellers across all the products within a category and can vary across 8% to 20% across different categories. For most markets in my analysis, this commission rate is 15 or 17%.
So sometimes the sponsored product also appear in the organic scene at the same time.
Yeah,
I was wondering what the ratio of the overlap are you observing?
yeah. So
Appear in both sections.
yeah. So the same product can appear as both organic and sponsored one. If I look at the top 4 sponsored ones, so they're usually located in the first row, about 30 to 40% of them also appear as organic results on the first page among these 60 positions. So that's about 1/3 of these top ones are also appear lower as organic.
So to add on Sam's point, so maybe Amazon is playing the equilibrium where high quality sellers do not have as a strong incentive to advertise as a low quality one because they otherwise would occupy a very good position as organic listings versus other settings. So for example, eBay, you can only be either the organic or the advertising, which creates different incentives there. So
Wait.
just more of a comment then.
Yeah. I think that's a great point. That's pretty related. It's very related to the kind of factual mechanism I'm going to discuss later in the talk. But I agree that many of these, so some of these top organic ones, they also do advertising, but most of them do not do advertising because they already occupy a pretty high spot, and you can still be there without doing advertising.
Do you have some sense for how your organic spot affects what the relationship between the organic spot and the sponsored spot are? Like, I'm assuming they're correlated in some way. Is it just like the sponsored spot is your organic spot
find ranks or like what's the?
So the sponsored ones are determined in a real-time ad auction. So which in principle does not depend on your organic conditions, but so although I'm going to abstract away from this scoring rule or these relevant scores that use in this auction, but in principle, Amazon uses this scoring rule or these weights or relevant weights in determining auction winners. In that sense, there could be some correlation if you have a.
In the score is where your organic positioning probably.
So that could be part of this, so estimated quality or some other metrics that Amazon can use for that auction. But it's not an implicit factor, explicit factor in there.
In general, people go here at the high level of the organic liquids. Generally, they're not being on sponsor ads.
So I think for these very high rank organic ones, they usually don't appear as sponsored ones. Some of them does, but not all. Most of them do not. It's more like they're lower organic ranking products. They're more likely to do it. So so last two so as you see, there are so many small sellers, and to guide sellers' bidding decisions, Amazon reports this median, lowest, and the highest bid of recent auction winners for each keyword, just as a guidance for sellers when they submit these bids. So I obtained these statistics from a third-party firm that collaborates with sellers. As I do not observe individual sellers' bids, I'm going to use these aggregate statistics of these winning bids in my estimation of the auction model rate.
How often are these reported?
Sorry?
How often are these statistics reported?
How often are these
Statistics reported?
So I think if you're an Amazon seller, whenever you want to choose a bid for a keyword, they will report you these statistics as a guidance. So in my data, I do observe a couple of snapshots of these suggestions. I don't observe a lot of time variation for the same keyword, so I'm not going to explore that variation over time. So just taking the average that
How does the Amazon bidding tool work? So typically I buy the campaign, I put in a budget,
yeah.
put in an objective. Does the algorithm generate the same bid for the advertiser in every auction independently of competition, distance to search word, or all sorts of things?
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I think on Amazon as a seller, you have two broad types of advertising tools. One is this automatic campaign where you just specify a daily budget and there's some other parameters to control, but essentially Amazon is going to bid on your behalf, or they allocate your budget across different keywords based on their predicted performance or other types. It's more like managed campaign. For others, you can choose a keyword specific bid, and you can also specify some budget for that campaign. So I think what Amazon recommends is that for new sellers, you should use these automatic bidding strategies, which allow you to get a sense of which keywords are more matched to your products. But later, as you get more experience, you can start to choose keywords that are more closely related to your own products. So my understanding is that a lot of sellers still use this keyword for their own bids instead of relying on Amazon's automatic bidding campaign. So I'm not going to model that part, assuming that all the sellers are going to submit their own bids.
I see. So soon we get to the modeling section, but you're tracking away from quality scores and algorithmic bidding. How does one solve the auction game?
Yeah, I want to defer that to my description of the auction model. I think there will be specific how I do the model. So I guess now I can move on to the model I developed. So the goal of this model is to predict what will be the consumer demand, seller profits, and welfare under any kind of factual set of sponsor positions in the search results. So the agents I'm going to include in my model are consumers, sellers, and the platform. The primitives I need to estimate are consumers' price sensitivity and search frictions, sellers' organic ranks, quality, and cost, and the platform's objective function. So when I describe the model, a market refers to a single keyword, but my estimation accounts for the fact that each product appears in the search results of different keywords. So the model has 3 stages. At the beginning, the platform chooses the average commission rate to balance its short-term revenues and some long-term considerations, which I'm going to specify later. Then the sellers will set prices and choose bid in the auction to maximize their expected profit. And last, consumers are going to make purchase decisions and their search frictions. Let me start from the consumer's problem and move upward. So consumers' utility of choosing a product J on day T follows a nested logic specification. So there's a product fixed effect, day fixed effect, a price, and unobserved demand shock. So here, this term in red represents the advertising, so the demand effects of advertising. SJT is an indicator of whether the seller appears in a sponsored position or not. So sponsored results on Amazon are labeled as sponsored to distinguish them from organic results. This label may have direct impacts on the demand, and this type of effects can go both ways. On one hand, some consumers may have aversion to sponsored results and also just skip sponsored results altogether. On the other hand, in principle, advertising can serve as a signal device and can signal high quality, so it could also boost demand. And the empirical evidence on these demand effects is mixed. I'm going to allow these effects to vary by characteristics, including whether it is a big brand or the number of reviews received by that product. And the last term is this nested logic shock. So I assume that all the products on the platform belong to the same nest, and the outside option is in a separate nest. It allows different substitution patterns on and off the platform. The search results contain.
Do you include the advertising effects in the model?
No, I remove these advertising effects when I compute well. So that's the additional. That's a therefore irrelevant part in my mind. So the search results include a total of n positions indexed by small n, which is the most prevalent type of search result in my data. Consumers in my model will consider only the top n results in search results, and this n can differ across different consumers. In reality, consumers may incur different search costs and evaluate only a subset of results among all available options. I'm going to use this lambda n to denote the share of consumers who consider each product in the search results. As n gets larger, lambda n becomes smaller. This assumption provides incentives for sellers to be ranked higher in the search results. My baseline model assumes this lambda n to be fixed. But my paper also considers the extension where consumers can form this constraint set endogenously in a sequential search model. Under this model, a seller's market share depends not only on prices, but also on the exact product arrangement in the search results and the share of different types of consumers. Yes.
So if I consider you don't mean click, you mean whether the product enters the consumer's choice.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, entering their consideration sets. So it's not that they're going to click on that.
So given most retail sites monetize clicks, where does clicks enter the consumer?
The clicks is not in the, so I do not observe consumers' click behavior. So I do not directly model the joint decision between viewing, clicking, or purchasing, but it is indeed in the seller's problem, as I will show you next time, in one second. So for the seller's problem, a seller chooses a price and also a bid each week to maximize their expected profits. And when they do so, they're going to account for the uncertainties in these realized search results, which can be driven by both organic ranks and auction outcomes. So these organic ranks are determined by the platform's ranking algorithm, and they're not observed by either the researcher or these sellers. I'm going to assume that the distribution of organic ranks for a keyword in week is fixed. And I'm going to estimate that distribution from the data. The realizations may or may not align with actual consumer preferences. And sellers knows the distribution of these ranks, but not the actual realizations. Similarly, auction outcomes on Amazon are also stochastic due to many factors like sellers' budget constraints or the platform experimentation.
Is there really that much variation in the organic ranks?
So I do,
From time to time?
from time to time, the top positions have relatively little variation, but there's a lot of variation in terms of, I guess, when you go to the second half of the search results, there's a lot of changes in relative positions and even in and out for that first page result.
The reason I'm asking is, if you were to assume that sellers know their organic ranks, it's relatively fixed in the short term. You can, instead of assuming they only know the distribution, not the realization. You can assume that they actually know the realization. These organic ranks.
Yeah, I think there's still a lot of, I guess, uncertainty when you go to the lower part of that. And I think for these top ranked sellers, they know that it's pretty high probability they're going to rank high, and that distribution will be known to the sellers. And there's another question.
Yeah. So, first, I have two questions. First, in the previous slide, does organic ranking enter the utility function?
The
Ranking, does it enter utility?
No. So it enters utility in the sense that there'll be more consumers considering a top ranked product. But once you condition on that the consumers consider that, it does not directly enter the consumer's utility function.
Okay, so to understand the counterfactual, is organic ranking a cost for a company? So you assume that SEO, I guess Amazon has SEO, right? So like that is a cost sometimes. So if instead of advertising, I actually decide not to do that, but then I put a lot of budget into organic ranking maximization, do you allow for that, or you're just assuming that?
So my baseline model does not allow for that, but I do have an extension where allow that the platform to change the accuracy of this ranking by imposing some cost of improving the accuracy. And I do some extrapolation to estimate that cost parameter and predict that what's the additional accuracy that Amazon could potentially gain from moving advertising. But that's not in the baseline model. I think also not in the presentation, but we can check offline to see what that is.
So here you assume organic is free for the company.
Yeah, so
Okay.
in the baseline model, yeah. So because of this uncertainty, I'll introduce randomness in auction outcomes. So sellers will bid for probabilities of winning each sponsor position. And the higher bid is associated with a larger probability of winning a top position. Yeah.
So what are the advertiser payments? They pay a bid for what, each click or each impression?
Yeah, so this is this slide. So given any realizations of the search results, here is the seller's profit function. So Sj is the market share, which can be derived from the demand model, and tau is commission rate set by the platform, and Cj is the marginal cost, not including any advertising payment. This ADJ represents the seller's total advertising payment. So on Amazon, this auction is a generalized second price auction on a pay per click basis. So the sellers are ranked based on their bids and need to pay a price for each click on the sponsor list. So this total advertising payment can be expressed as this inverse conversion rate, gamma GR, or can be written as this payment per click or PPC multiplied by the number of clicks in that position. And then decompose this clicks in that position as this inverse conversion rate, gamma GR, multiplied by your market share in that sponsor position. So this gamma GR can be interpreted as the expected number of clicks per sponsor unit. So higher gamma GR means a lower conversion rate. So the seller gets more clicks that do not convert to a purchase. And the seller is going to know this parameter and optimize their bids.
I'm sorry to keep pushing on this click thing, but typically clicks enter the quality scores of the position auction, right?
You mean the platform's predicted clicks? Yeah, so there's a predicted, I guess, clicks that the platform use in this, yeah.
Right, so probabilities that when the auction already affected by click rates, right?
Yeah, so in my model, I don't observe these, I guess, these relevant scores or these weights in the scoring rule. So I'm going to abstract from that practice, which could be underestimate my estimate of the benefit of advertising. Because I think that the goal of that part is more like to make these sponsor results better match to your preferences. So I'm going to underestimate the real benefits of it.
But my bidding strategy then should be bid lower. But then if I'm trying to infer advertiser valuations, I might be underestimating the advertiser valuations. All this good.
Yeah, I acknowledge that's one limitation of my data and estimates, that do not cover that in.
And the quality scores also appear in the payment, right? Because if you are high quality, then you have to be paid lower, right?
So the actual payment is pretty obscure from the seller's perspective. I think on Amazon, they just tell the sellers that you're going to, you just specify the maximum amount you're willing to pay for a click. And the sellers will just make that bid. The exact payment algorithm or payment scheme is not publicly disclosed. At least I haven't found any source for that.
It affects the market share.
So the bid affects your position in the search results, and that will affect your market share.
And why do I see bids in the market share?
Because the factor of the bids will because your advertising payment depends on the bids. You see here, the market share doesn't depend on the bid, but your profit depends on the bids.
But then if a bid higher, I have higher chance of winning, and then it might affect the purchase and thus change my market share.
So here, the profit function is conditioned on any realization of the search result, which is this omega. So this is conditioned on the realization of both the organic ranks and auction outcomes, and what's the profit function.
Conditional on winning, yeah.
But the chance of any realization of the search result will depend on your bid.
I see, so search result omega has the
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's move on.
So to derive the seller's expected profit function, I would just need to integrate over all the uncertainties in the search results, which as we discussed, will depend on both the auction outcomes and organic ranks. And that's all the uncertainties that sellers are facing. So in equilibrium, sellers cannot increase the expected profits by setting a different price or submitting a different bid. So let me conclude the model by the platform's problem. So the platform chooses a commission rate to maximize the combination of commissions, ad revenues, consumer surplus, and seller profit. And this parameter mu can approximate the animal's long-term considerations in terms of consumer retention or acquisition and maximize long-term profit. As I briefly discussed earlier, this commission fee can represent a broader set of instruments available to the platform. And these instruments can act as a substitute for advertising revenues. For example, a higher commission fee can lower sellers' margins and reduce their willingness to pay for sponsored positions. And this will lead to a lower bid and a lower advertising revenue for the platform. And this substitution across different instruments is captured in my model. And last, the model does not impose any automatic condition regarding the set of sponsored positions. I can use my model estimate to examine whether the current configuration is optimal or not. So I want to acknowledge that my model abstracts from a few potentially important margins, like this seller entry and exits, these relevant scores in the auction, and also personalization in these search results. So I'm happy to chat offline about any of these limitations, how that affects my interpretation of the results. So in the interest of time, I'm going to be very brief about the estimation results. So on the demand side, a key primitive is the share of consumers who consider each position in search results. So instead of estimating that from my model without any experimental variation, so I borrowed estimates from this paper. I think the authors of this paper have developed a Chrome extension that can track the user score position, which allow them to directly measure what's the share of consumers who reach any given point on the search results. And this is their estimate from the paper. So a media consumer considers about 15 products in search results, which is about 3 to 4 rows. This figure shows how these demand effects of advertising vary with the number of reviews. Generally, consumers perceive sponsor results as lower quality than they actually are. To do a calculation, this is equivalent to about 8% of consumers who always skip sponsor results and never consider them. But this negative perception will gradually shrink as the number of reviews increases. This figure compares the estimated utility for products in each position. So the left panel is with this negative perception, and the right panel is the actual utility. We see that organic rankings are reasonably correlated with consumer preferences, and sponsor results tend to deliver a lower utility to consumers, even getting rid of this negative perception. But this figure does not tell how this ranking algorithm vary across different markets. In this figure, I compute the correlation between the estimated product utility and law of organic ranks within each market. This correlation has a large variation across different markets. In some markets with more standardized products, this organic ranking is more accurate. For in other products with a lot of new products or more differentiated products, this ranking algorithm could be less informative. Here I'm comparing the estimated marginal cost for the sponsored and organic results, with and without advertising payment. When we do not consider this advertising payment, these sponsored results actually have lower marginal cost compared to organic counterparts. But this additional advertising payment eliminates and reverses this cost advantage. And last, this figure computes the different components of the platform objective function under different commission rates. By assuming the observed choice of commission rate is optimal, I could identify the platform's weight on the welfare of consumers and sellers. Finally, I can show you some counterfactual results. In the first exercise, I remove all sponsor positions from the search results and replace them with organic listing. In this figure, I hold the commission rate constant. The blue bars plot the outcome measures in the status quo with sponsor positions, and the red bars plot the counterfactual scenario with only organic listings. So when holding the commission rate constant, removing advertising could benefit consumers and sellers. And this is consistent with my model estimate. As I showed you earlier, these sponsor results on average deliver lower utility to consumers. Although they have lower marginal cost, this additional advertising payment reverses this cost advantage, leading to even higher prices for sponsored products. Now let's look at what happens if the platform can adjust the commission rate in response. This figure plots consumer surplus, seller profits, and commissions under different commission rates in absence of advertising. The platform objective function is maximized at a commission rate much higher than the current rate. We're already seeing intuition for this increase because when there's advertising, a lower commission rate could bring more advertising revenues for the platform. And when we remove that incentive, my model predicts a substantial increase in the commission fee. that the platform is going to charge. In this figure, the blue and red bars replicate the previous figures I just showed you, and these new green bars how the outcome matters in the counterfactual scenario with an endogenous commission fee. In this case, compared to the status quo, both consumer surplus and seller profits decrease. And this reversal in the welfare comparison highlights the importance of choosing the appropriate counterfactual scenario. So if advertising became unavailable, Amazon would have a strong incentive to raise more revenues through other channels. It does not have to be the commission fee, but can be any instrument that used to act as a substitute to advertising revenues. My model suggests that compared to raising the commission fee, introducing advertising could raise more revenues to the platform, but also has a smaller negative impact on both consumers and sellers. This is because the auction mechanism could elicit the seller's information and also allow the platform to price discriminate against different types of sellers. This is related to the previous question we just discussed. Roughly speaking, you can think of two types of sellers: a high quality, high cost organic results, and low quality, low cost sponsored one. In advertising, the platform can lower the commission fee on the first type, but charge a higher effective commission fee on the second type. This can bring more revenues to the platform and could also enhance efficiency that can be shared by other market participants as well. I think I'm running out of time, so I'm going to briefly conclude. I think my paper highlights this important channel that when we consider these platforms with access to different revenue-raising instruments, it is important to allow for the platform response. Under a fixed commission fee, advertising on Amazon seems to hurt consumers and sellers. But once we allow the platform to adjust along other margins, then advertising could be beneficial to consumers and sellers by incentivizing the platform to charge a lower commission. As I will show, another exercise I didn't have a chance to show you, a limit or a cap in the number of sponsored positions could be a better policy target than either status quo or a complete ban in advertising. Thanks, that's all I want to share with you today. Thanks.
Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to referee this paper. I really enjoyed reading this paper. So I have lots of good things to say about it. Chuan already went through the kind of motivation very well. You know, Amazon's ad revenue has kind of increased tremendously. A lot of people talk about Amazon as one of the big ad companies, but in reality, most of that advertising revenue is coming from these sponsored results on platform, right? And so really, it's just another way that Amazon is kind of extracting rents from the sellers on its platform beyond the commission fees. And so Chuan is asking, how do sponsored slots affect consumers, sellers, and the platform? When those sponsored products are displacing the organic products, this can be good or this can be bad, depending on how well the organic products surface products that are relevant to consumers. There might be something that the organic algorithms are not getting correct that an advertising mechanism would actually help solve. And then, of course, it's an ad auction. They have to pay advertising prices. Prices are going to readjust. We want some kind of equilibrium outcome. And then beyond the sellers kind of competing with each other, we're also interested in how the platform might readjust through changing commission levels. That's also kind of one of the main punchlines that Chuan has. There's a lot of data that he's bringing to bear, which I really love. Realizations of search results for a whole bunch of markets, your standard kind of product characteristics, but then he didn't talk about it, but he also has some real data from one prominent seller on Amazon that he uses to validate his estimations of sales, which I really loved. But really, I think one of the really important things in this paper is the bidding data that he's bringing to bear. It's very much aggregate winning bidding statistics. And so that there's actually not much data to work with. And I think a great contribution of this paper is how do we use that in a sensible way? Of course, there's going to be some limitations. In terms of modeling, nested logit demand with consideration sets, firms are going to set both prices and bids. There's already a lot of discussion on bids, and I'm going to return to a little bit of that discussion as well. And then the platforms choose commission to maximize some weighted average of all of these players' objectives. And the main counterfactual results, removing sponsored products, is going to harm consumers because the platform is going to adjust by re-optimizing commission. So going back to that story of that advertising auction is another way to kind of extract rents from those sellers. I want to say, like, this is a really difficult paper to write. Here's just some of the literature on Amazon. You know, the top 3 are all job market papers, mine included, that look at Amazon and focus on specific. Ashvin, your paper is part of this group. There's a lot of papers I'm trying to be limited. All of these job market papers really focus in on specific aspects of this massive platform that we all use, right? And so it's very easy to kind of look at each of these papers and say, well, you know, this paper doesn't have X, Y, Z. And we've already had some of that. You know, Ken was kind of reflecting Gutierrez. He has a variation in commission rates in his data. Dante, you already mentioned entry and exit. That's Lee and Musov. I don't know if I'm meant to be here to kind of harp on about search costs as a primitive. I won't be doing too much of that. And of course, you know, other relevant papers here as well. I think this paper is really well differentiated in terms of the question. A lot of those papers I just pointed out are very much self-preferencing papers. Also, in of itself, that's nice. But it also has really important contributions in bringing in aggregate bidding data and telling us how we can potentially incorporate it into the models, all of which these papers kind of mostly stay away completely from. And so, like, any kind of progress we can make on advertising auctions and bidding on Amazon, I think is very admirable. And so, like, I think it's a great paper. So some caveats and limitations that have already been brought up. I'm going to just mention them. I'm not going to focus on these particular ones, but personalization of sponsored ads is going to be an issue. Scoring, we've already had lots of discussion. Search behavior, it could change. Bidding behavior could change. You know, some of this is allowed in the model, but not others. Organic ranking algorithm could change. Longer term effects. But nice thing, a lot of these things, if you look in the appendix, you're going to see some discussion of this. And I found reading the appendix very illuminating. And I was really struck by how much work Chuan has put into the appendix in addressing some of these. Okay, so like comment 1 is actually more of a thing I really like about this paper. How do we kind of bring in this bidding data? Nash-Bertrand with logit model is kind of well established. I know certainly for myself when I was writing and thinking about can I incorporate sponsored options into the model, introducing prices and bids is going to create a lot of confusion in the equilibrium. And so it's not obvious how you would do this. He writes down his profit function, adding the advertising payment at the end. It kind of looks like that would create a lot of confusion. What he does is kind of distills that into sellers caring about the probability of winning an auction based on the bid. There's a procedure where he simulates this particular probability. Yes, it's somewhat kind of static, but I think it's a nice way to abstract and incorporate this into the model. We have it, so the probability of winning an auction is in blue. We still have the advertising payment in yellow. That we've kind of discussed comes from the pay-per-click and the inverse conversion rate gamma, which is, I think, a really interesting object. It ultimately gets parameterized into something that's pretty parametric, but I think it's really interesting that he's able to recover at a product by product level how much it costs for a particular product to end up in a sponsored slot, because this can differ across products. And I'll give an example at the very end why that might matter. I think this gamma is very interesting in of itself. Basically, what we're doing is we're using standard demand estimation, recovering margins, but now margins, instead of being just marginal cost, is marginal cost plus advertising payments, because we've structured advertising payments in such a way that it nests as a form of marginal cost. And I think that's a really nice simplification. What I think I convinced myself we can identify gamma J. That comes from observing how often a seller wins an auction and then the market share when they do win the auction. But I think I really wanted to see the data variation that was actually pinning these things down. I think you have the data variation, and in fact, using some of it in the new demand models instruments. And that brings me to model comment 2. I think we could do with a little bit more model-free evidence in the paper, at least the old paper right now. We had relationships between sales and position and differences between sponsored and organic products. Your advertising data, it isn't that necessarily rich, but you do have a lot of variation in how sellers are entering the sponsored position and exiting it. And the way you've drawn the model, you should have to identify the exogenous variation from that endogenous variation. And so I was hoping for more model-free evidence around the bidding there. Part of that is going to tell us what's the variation that's identifying that gamma error. Even with your aggregate bidding data, I think you could maybe show us some of the market level regressions. You've got some really cool results that I think you didn't get to in the presentation, where Chuan shows that for the markets where the correlation between the organic ranks and his estimated utilities are particularly high. So this is where the organic search results are already really good. Removing sponsored slots doesn't harm consumers that much. Whereas in the markets where there's a lot of this relationship between organic ranks and true utilities, removing sponsored results hurts the most. And that's really nice. And I think that could be shown in the reduced format as well, just to lead it up. It doesn't have to spoil the result or anything. Comment 3. I only really brought this up because I know you're still thinking about the demand model. In the paper, you have the logit slides, you have an inside-outside nested logit. The implied price markups from these functional forms can be somewhat restrictive, and I wouldn't bring it up except given the structure of the paper being recover margins and then decompose that margin into marginal costs and advertising costs. Your counterfactuals could be quite sensitive to these types of price marks. I'm not necessarily advocating for random coefficients here, but maybe understanding more how these restrictions might play into the results would be good. Okay. I think some of that shows up in your graphs of the utilities or the positions. So in the paper model, the ordering of utilities is quite strong, stronger than I would expect. So the first organic position product, this is normalized utility, but it's quite clearly a superior product to the other products. And I wouldn't necessarily have expected this in a product space like Amazon. A lot of your search terms are going to be markets where we would expect lots of competitors that can produce a combination of price and quality that is competitive with another product. This might just be driven by the organic ranking algorithm. So I'm not necessarily saying this is a problem, but it does show up that when we move from the less flexible demand model to the new flexible demand model, the slope does get kind of a little bit more flat. So there isn't this strong difference with the strong order. Okay. No, I won't talk about this. Okay, so I'm just going to end with I think having this written down and out there is really nice because it enables a lot of research about sponsored products. We already had lots of questions about other things to do with sponsored products that I think can now be done, building off what you're doing. And so I myself have questions about sponsored results. This is the part where like I bring up this random thing I saw on Amazon and expect you to answer what's going on. I look at some small appliances in my paper, and one thing I noticed was the top sponsored results tend to be very expensive products. I just did this yesterday. It's still true. Back in my day, it was gold-plated like toasters. Now it's toasters with a touch screen. And so this is going to the pay-per-click stuff, right? I don't know who would scroll past this and who would click it, right? I would scroll past it. I'd be like, that's kind of funny, but I'm not going to click on it. That's free advertising for that particular product. That seems a little weird. It's not just toasters. I took baby stroller from one of your keywords, and that's also happening here. Baby strollers aren't that expensive. And so two things here. Maybe you also saw the big video ad and stuff like that. The most prominent position is growing in size, and often it hides the prices as well. It's not part of the listing, but the amount of information is slightly different. And then expensive products seem to end up at the top advertising results. So this might be related to inefficiencies to do with pay-per-click. I'm not sure what's going on here. Is the scoring not working? Is this Amazon trying to create anchoring and price effects? I don't know. But I think this type of research can be enabled by what you've already done. And so great paper, important contribution, looking forward to a lot more work in this space.
Thanks so much for the super helpful discussion. I think all these points are taken. I think all these potential caveats and limitations, I think, are totally reasonable. I think I would blame many of them to the data limitations because I really don't have much, I guess, variation to identify some of these margins we just discussed, like this scoring rule or other personalization. But I do believe that more data, more work along this line will be very, very helpful. I think I agree that I should be more transparent, or I guess more upfront about the identification of these inverse conversion rates and how that's come from different variation. I think intuitively you can compare two sellers with similar estimated margin. One is doing more advertising, the others doing less frequent advertising, and that just drives or pin down what's the variation in terms of these conversion rates or their intensive, their willingness to advertise. I think I should be more clear about that identification and how the data variation could extend that. I also agree that I should do more work on the review form part, using my data to show some of the patterns that drive my estimates and or the correlation across different markets or the heterogeneity across different markets. And I also totally agree that more research should be done. I think Amazon is bringing this advertising more and more prominent. So when I scrape this data, many of these positions are still in the middle or at the bottom of the search results. But now I just checked that now they're moving these positions even up. So they're more like at the very top or just in the third or fourth rows or in the middle. So they're making more and more money from this practice and see more bigger or more prominent advertising at the top. I think that would be very interesting for future research and think about these things. And thanks so much for the discussion, for everyone's questions and comments. Thank you.